Lepo zdrav sem skupaj tukaj na Inštitutu za novejšo zgodovino. Hello everyone here at the Institute of Contemporary History in Ljubljana, and also welcome to all, hello to everyone who are with us via Zoom. We have a very exciting day ahead of us, starting with the lecture of Igor Duda. Igor is Associate Professor at the Department of History at the Juraja Dobrile University of Pula. And he's also one of the founder and the first head of the Center for Cultural and Historical Research of Socialism, which has just celebrated its 10th anniversary. So congratulations. And for all the wonderful work that the Institute has done over the last decade, I must say that I always enjoy the events that I managed to attend in Pula. Igor is primarily focusing on history of everyday life and social history of Socialist Yugoslavia. He published several books and articles in Croatian and English, and I will now list just a few of them. In 2010 and then again in 2014, his book Pronađeno blagostanje, svakodnevni život I potrošačka kultura u Hrvatskoj u 70-ih I 80-ih was published. Then in 2015, the book Danas kada postaje pionir, djetinjstvo I ideologija jugoslovenskog socijalizma. And then in 2019, an edited volume Komunisti I komunističke partije, politike, akcije, debate. This was published in 2019. And some of the books we just received as a gift from Pula are here, so you can take a look after the presentation. Igor was the principal investigator of the research project Making of the Socialist Man, Croatian Society and the Ideology of Yugoslav Socialism. The edited volume ensuing from this project was published in 2017. And currently, he's the principal investigator within the research project Microstructures of Yugoslav Socialism, Croatia 1970 to 1990, which is supported by the Croatian Research Agency. Part of this project will be presented in his today's lecture with the title We Are All Good People, Local Communities in Yugoslavia Between Action and Bureaucracy. The lecture will be around 45 minutes long, followed by the discussion. The lecture will be held in English, but then the discussion will be held in English, Slovenian, Croatian, Serbian, and
Bosnian.
Bosnian, yes.
Yes.
Exactly. Thank you, Igor, for coming, and we are all excited to hear your lecture. Please.
Thank you, Anna. Dobar dan svima. Hello to everybody. Thank you, Anna, for the invitation, and thank you also for the congratulations towards our center, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary. So yes, you heard the title, you know it already. I have the a part of the title in Slovenian as well. Maybe you're recognizing why, but if not, you will find out soon during the lecture why there is that sentence, Mi smo vsi dobri ljudje. My interest in the local communities of Yugoslavia, or Mjesna zajednice in Croatian, krajevna skupnost in Slovenian, and so on, is actually a part of a larger project called Microstructures of Yugoslav Socialism, Croatia 1970-1990, or in short, Micro-Socialism. We started already a long time ago, it seems like ages ago, in November 2018, and we will be working until spring next year. We should be done with all our publications and results by then. You see the names of the research group: Chiara Bonfiglioli, Tomislav Branđelica, Anita Buhin, Tina Filipović, Magdalena Najbaragičić, Sasha Vezagić, and as consultants, Ulf Brumbauer and Christian Axbo Nilsen. The project is financed by the Croatian Science Foundation. We are focusing on a number of municipalities within Croatia in the 70s and 80s. Some of the municipalities among those around 115 which existed between 62 and 92. We are covering different themes within the project. So the media in the local community, public and state security in the local community, in the local community, not in the sense of a unit, but broadly speaking. Then the position and influence of the veterans, partisan war veterans, women in the society, protection of self-managing relations and rights, economic relations between companies, economics and politics, and then culture between creation and participation. One of those topics, the green one here, is my research of the local communities. I'm using the exact literal translation, local community, also in English, as a unit below the level of the municipality. I'm saying now a unit, but I'm going to explain later that it was not meant to be a unit, but really a community. Where to start? Maybe with 1958 and the new program of the League of Communists of Yugoslavia. Everyday needs of the population got an important place in that document. The communists decided to put an emphasis on the issues of leisure, consumption, culture, education, different areas which were important for the modernization of the society, for the establishment of the system of welfare and well-being. Therefore, the housing communities as a special brand new units were mentioned there as well. Communities which were supposed to be non-party organizations led according to the principles of direct socialist democracy, and places in which citizens were expected to show their initiative and creativity. It was all a part of a larger and more important project of Yugoslav socialism, which started after the Yugoslav Soviet split. So the gradual withering away of the state, according to the original Marxist principles from the 19th century, which meant that certain, maybe not all, but definitely a large number of functions which were in the hands of state should be given to the hands of social self-management. So not only the worker self-management within the working places, but also to the hands of social self-management, which meant to the general population, to the masses, but I'm going to add immediately to the organized masses, not just masses as such. And of course, all that was expected to be part of a larger, final utopian project of establishing the empire of freedom. In that same year, 1958, a second in the series of three exhibitions, Family and the Household, Porodica I domaćinstvo, as it was called at the time, was organized in Zagreb, at the Zagreb Fair, by the Yugoslav brand new organization, Family and the Household, led at the time by Pepca Kardelj. You see some of the photos from the large exhibition. So the examples of modern city quarters, new towns, new modern lifestyles and ways of life in those places, social catering, social welfare, kindergartens, schools in the neighborhoods, all other important facilities, all the way to the catering, social catering, restaurants, laundry shops, and other facilities and services. The idea was that something as the housing community, which existed back then for a short period in the very late 50s and early 60s, was there to offer help to a modern nuclear family, especially to the woman, to the mother, to the worker, to the working mother, which was probably the most important figure in such a nuclear family at the time. So the whole story of Family and the Household is, as I said, part of a larger project. You see here family and the household 1957, then the exhibitions followed, but the family and the household as the organization changed its name very soon. First it became the Conference of the Local Communities and Families of Yugoslavia, and later on the Conference for the Development of Local Communities of Yugoslavia. As such, it was part of the general umbrella mass socialist organization, the Socialist Alliance of the working people. The party program from '58 was, of course, important for the narrative I'm trying to build here, as I said. Then the housing community, as I said, which started in 1959 officially and lasted until 1963. Why is 1963 important? Even more so, maybe 1962, because of the communal reform. The first reform was done in 1955, but then in '62, Yugoslavia decided to introduce the large municipalities, altogether more than 500 in the federation as a whole. When those large municipalities were established, they realized that they needed something smaller, something closer to the locals, to the local neighborhoods, to the local peasants living in the villages, that the authority should not be far away from them. Therefore, they somehow used those housing communities as a bridge towards a new way of organization, which was the local community. Krajevna skupnost, Mjesna zajednica, which appeared then for the first time in the Yugoslav Constitution of 1963. You see the graph here showing the number of local communities in Yugoslavia. The number increased and reached its maximum in 1982, then slightly decreased and stagnated during the 80s. It was mainly connected to the economic crisis of the early 80s and the efforts to merge certain local communities in order to have a stronger budget, to be able to finance certain activities more easily. But as some were saying, it was not the only reason. The other reason was the constant threat of bureaucracy, especially municipal bureaucracy from the municipal level, which was trying to diminish the role of the local communities. I will come later on to the Constitution of '74. The Associated Labor Act of 1976 was especially important because it finally constituted the triangle of social self-management. I will show it later. Then there was a resolution on local communities by the federal parliament. Then some of the republics voted on their republican acts on local communities. Some never did, and the federation as a whole never had a federal act on local communities. And then there were different attempts to reform the system in 1989. This is the map showing the municipalities all around Yugoslavia in '82. So the year when the number of local communities reached its maximum. You see more than 3,500 local communities at a time. On average, a local community had 19 square kilometers and a population of about 1,600 people. It was really an average, but actually the population varied from 100 to 20,000, depending on the area, on the density of the population in different parts of a municipality or Yugoslavia. It was different whether you were living in an area with rare villages, in a hilly area, or in a big city with large neighborhoods. All these varieties, of course, complicated a common solution which would easily then operate in every single situation for the local communities in different parts of Yugoslavia. But now I would like to say something more about the concept of the local communities and its place within the social self-management. So on one side there is the worker, employed man or woman, who have their work time and their workplace. On the other side, in their free time, which is actually 16 hours per day, they were also citizens and consumers, and more often during the 70s and 80s actually understood by the system as such, as citizens and as consumers particularly. So the idea was, why wouldn't they be self-managers as well outside of their workplace? Why wouldn't they engage in self-management at their place of dwelling, in their streets, in their neighborhood? The idea behind it was that a socialist citizen actually is torn apart between, because of this internal conflict between worker and consumer. There is that, as they were saying, this duality of souls within the socialist citizen, and there should be some tools, some instruments which would enable this duality, this internal conflict to disappear, to be more mild, if possible, at least in one way or the other. So therefore, the local communities were also understood as counterparts to the workers' councils. The story of the workers' councils is usually more researched. There has been more research already in the 20th century, but especially in the last 20 years. But now, so after 1963, especially after the Constitution of 74, there is that idea. Yes, there is the workers' councils, but we need those people again when they come back home in the afternoon. The workplace is the source of funding. If the workers can decide there in the workers' councils how to distribute some parts of the profit their company, their factory is making, if they can vote on which percentage of the income will be then distributed to the municipality, to the local community and so on, then these people, together with other people, their neighbors, should have a place where they can continue to participate in this chain of decision making. And when that funding arrives to the neighborhood, they should be able to decide exactly what to do with that funding through the system of mutual planning. It was susretno planiranje in Croatian, and long process of negotiations with high participation of citizens, hopefully. These were such places. One of the local community seats of the local communities from the late 70s in one of the new parts of a city. Doesn't matter where it is, although this one is taken in Pula. A bit more on the theoretical framework coming from Kardelj, from Juraj Hrženjak, which was a top official in the highest ranks of the Socialist Alliance of the Working People in Croatia and Yugoslavia, and Zdravko Tomac, who from the perspective of a political scientist actually, but also a politician, researched local communities in the 70s and 80s and the whole system of self-management, with a small addition of Jovan Đorđević at the very end from the 1960s. So, local communities were there to humanize the environment, and as such should be a tool against bureaucratization and alienation of citizens in those new city quarters. They were there to establish humane socialist relations, to enforce solidarity and empathy, to establish different bonds and interactions between the citizens. As such, they were actually not a part of the local authorities, not a part of the municipality, but a special organization which was not just a hand of municipal power, which is then reaching the very last street in the furthest part of a municipality. So the local communities there to implement the direct socialist democracy, as they were calling it, or in other words, social self-management. It was perceived as an extended family, as Edvard Kardelj was saying, as a school of self-management, as an anticipation of a future society. Even more so because in the 1960s, the ideologists of Yugoslav socialism realized that on the contrary of macro-socialism, there is micro-socialism, which in the future they expected would be more important. Those microorganisms, microstructures, such as local communities, should be used in order to achieve detotalitarianization of the society, to introduce more spontaneity, and to establish a proper socialist-free individual. So that was the utopian vision. of a neighborhood, of a village, of a city quarter, of a local community in Yugoslavia. As you might expect, utopia is one thing and then practice is different, although there are things, of course, we are going to see that, which were realized in practice. This is the first mention of the local communities in the Yugoslav Constitution of 63. Then it was copy-pasted in all Republican constitutions, but in 63, local communities was only a facultative unit. So yes, it is there as a possibility, but citizens really were not expected to start founding new communities immediately. A big change occurred in 1974 with the next constitution, when communities actually became obligatory units. Obligatory with that addition that they actually their foundation depends on the will of citizens of the certain territory. So yes, it's again a tool of self-management, but there is more pressure. They are there in the constitution, they are important for the system, so please try through the League of Communists, through the Socialist Alliance of the Working People, through the very local branches in the local communities of those organizations, try to organize people, try to convince them to establish a local community of their own. Why? Because in such way, they would be able to decide on physical improvement of their settlement, housing, communal activities, childcare and social security, education, culture, physical culture, consumer protection, the conservation and improvement of the human environment, national defense, and so on, as it was described in the 1974 Constitution. And then after 74, and with the Associated Labor Act of 76, we finally got the so-called triangle of the social self-management. On one side, the BOLs, the basic organization of associated labor. On the other side, self-managing communities of interest. And in the third corner, local communities. Within this triangle, discussions were supposed to be organized, planning, mutual planning, joint decision-making, delegates were sent from the local communities to the communities of interest, and the BOLs, from BOLs to the local communities and communities of interest, and so on and so on. So those delegations and delegates were supposed to make final decision on funding and the uses, the final use of a certain fund. Do we need a kindergarten? Yes, we do. Let's organize a way how to build it if the municipality is too slow. Let's raise the percentage of income which is coming from the local BOL, which had, for example, a branch on the territory of our local community. People working in that company, in that BOL, have children who have the need for the kindergarten in the neighborhood. Let's raise the amount they give from 1 to 2%. Let's find additional funding, and let's build that kindergarten within a year, hopefully, and not wait for the municipality to build it in 3, 4, or 5 years. Or if our local surrounding is better off than the rest of municipality, let's raise more money and let's build even a better kindergarten than those ones which are built according to the municipal or national standards. Let's add additional rooms, let's employ more women working there, and so on and so on. So these were the tools which local communities had on their disposals, which were the bodies of the local community. This is the usual structure. There is the assembly, there is the president, the secretary, the council of the local community. There are then two tools of direct democracy. One is citizens gathering, is what, and the other one is referendum. There are different councils and commissions for different fields: education, health, trade, housing, general people's defense, and so on and so on. There is the Conciliation or Peace Council, which was there to prevent conflicts between the neighbors regarding borders, different neighborly relations, and so on and so on, to stop the conflict before it reaches proper lawyers and tribunals. There was the Consumer Council, which was there for the communication between the local community and shops, supermarkets, department stores on that territory, but different crafts as well, hairdressers, shoemakers, photographers, whatever they had there on their territory. Apart from that, there were local branches of political and social organizations, Socialist Alliance of the Working People, the party, the Partisan Veteran Organization, the Child Care Organization, then Red Cross had its branch, the Socialist Youth its branch, and so on and so on. At some point there was the idea that trade unions should also appear in the local communities, but that really didn't work out well. And there were delegations and delegates sent within those different units within the self-managing triangle and to the assembly of the municipality, to one of the houses of the municipal assembly, the house of local communities. In a more complicated way, I'll just slowly show, don't be scared, one of the schemes from a local municipality from Dubrovnik. This is how a full scheme actually functioned with all the bodies, with all the commissions, with all the councils, with all the representatives, and so on and so on. So, I mean, it was a form of debureaucratization, but as you know, or as you might expect, yes, there was a new bureaucracy emerging, and there were complications along that way. There were caricatures, cartoons regarding the local communities. I'm taking those from the monthly called Mjesne, zajednice, which was published for Yugoslavia as a whole in Zagreb and Belgrade. It was a joint edition in Croatian, Serbian, Bosnian, which covered then Yugoslavia as a whole and was distributed to the local communities. It was not sold openly at newspaper stands. But here again, you can see all those bricks which are building the local community, from the housing council to different associations and societies, all the way to firefighters and others. There are other cartoons showing different relations within the local community. So poor local community trying to manage everything what they should do, trying to push that car called plans or planning, 1 year, 5 year planning. And in the car, there is the municipality, all other structures of the social self-management, statistical offices, plan makers, urban developers, and so on and so on. And the local community is actually sweating because it has no apparatus through which it could successfully do all the tasks which are written in the constitution, in the which should be done or expected to be fulfilled. Again, one of the plans, 81, 85, working hard in order to achieve and write those plans. Yes, there were great successes. Thousands and thousands of local communities all around Yugoslavia were extremely successful. They were building and they were about to build new facilities, new infrastructure, paving the roads, introducing land phone lines, reinforcing the water supply system, building cultural centers, social centers, collaborating and visiting each other, organizing referendums on self-contribution taxes, and so on and so on. They were close to their citizens. In most of such successful cases, there were strong enthusiasts, strong individuals, or a small group of strong individual enthusiasts who were then pushing hard, who were really there, active for several years. They were recognized from their locals as strong personalities, and they were able to mobilize their neighbors. One of such was a lady. I'm picking now a woman, although unfortunately women presented only up to 12% among the delegates of the local communities all around Yugoslavia, not more than 12. 15 in some years, that was the average. So she, in the late 70s, she had 35 years of public service in different institutions. She was about to retire soon, and she was active in the local community Upper Town, Gornji Grad, in Zagreb. As she explained in the late 70s, bureaucracy was destroying the self-managing role of local community. And she regretted for the old times. As she said, it was easier in the past, not because we were younger, but because we worked on reconstruction with more elan and enthusiasm based on common interest, on common desire. There are many other accounts coming from the archival documents of the Socialist Alliance of the Working People, the Conference for the Development of Local Communities, and the paper Mjesne, zajednice, which I mentioned earlier. It was clear that although debureaucratization was expected to happen, there was also a parallel process of further bureaucratization. So bureaucracy was supposed to hand over to the working people and citizens. But actually, yes, there is a big question mark. What was then going on with the bureaucracy on the municipal level? How strong it was? How often it was there as a sort of public service, as a help to all those volunteers in the local communities? How often the municipality as a bureaucratic apparatus was suffocating local communities, how often it was helping them. And along the way, there was the constant fear that local community should take some public duties from the municipality, but to be very careful not to become an extension of the municipality, of the power from above while doing all this. And you see, yeah, this is a good example of the fear of bureaucratization of a local community. There are meetings, there are decisions, there are papers, there are signatures, there are stamps, and is actually an individual, again, being alienated in such a system which was supposed to cancel the alienation and the fear of alienation. The people who were in charge of keeping local community alive and not being bureaucratized were activists. Usually in 90% of the cases, volunteers, not professionals. And this is an image, a prototype of an ideal activist. It doesn't exist as such, as a single document, but from different accounts, I made such a list myself. So such a person was always there, ready to help, hardworking, humble in whatever he or she is doing. He or she is supposed to have strong social intelligence skills in order to communicate well with the locals. Enough time, lot of free time, which has to be invested in such a job, to motivate others, mobilize them, to have a strong feeling of solidarity, sense for common good, and of course, if not, I would say, I'm going to say it like this. A clear communist background was not a must, but definitely anti-communist background could not be accepted. So neutral to positive was the field in which such people were expected to be. When it comes to citizens themselves, here are some data from the 70s, a research done by the Institute for Social Research from Zagreb. So 39% of citizens frequently took part in assemblies on the local level, 23% took part at the Socialist Alliance meetings, 21% took part in the meetings of the local community. This is high. They hoped for more, but I would say if we compare it to the nowadays participation on the very local level, this is higher than it is today, at least if I compare the data for Croatia. When asked why not, why do you not want to participate, usually they say lack of time, but some definitely say it's no use. The decisions are made elsewhere, the bureaucracy does what they have to do, and we are not really important figures there. The figures who were mostly active actually in such local communities were persons with more free time, or people who are retired but still wanted to do something for the system. So pensioners of all kinds, military pensioners, former Yugoslav army officers, and different groups of, as they used to call them, universal activists who were there for years and years. sometimes because they wanted to, sometimes because they were not able to find a replacement good enough. So the locals were actually asking them, please stay. We cannot be as good as you are. Although in different documents there is the directive, the suggestion, please change the people, rotate them. It's not good if for years and years the same people are there being active. Practices from all around Yugoslavia show that the interest was stronger whenever there was a concrete small action. So let's dig out a canal for the landline, phone lines in the 80s. Let's do it together. Yes. For the whole Saturday and Sunday, the neighbors are digging the canals. If there is just a discussion in a meeting room, then the turnout is lower. That was a general conclusion in a large number of documents. Let's go now to our concrete local community. Although it is an invented one, because it comes from a TV series, it was really organized in this fictional way as it was actually happening in real life. And so many elements which are happening in this Slovenian TV series, which was produced in 1980-81 in 9 episodes and broadcasted on TV Ljubljana at the time. So all important elements are there, and every single episode actually tells a lot on what was going on in the local communities. I see on your faces that some are recognizing the series, or remember it from the 80s, or maybe it was showed again and again in Slovenia. So what is it about? There is a local community in an urban center, let's say it's Ljubljana. All the elements of self-management are there, but also different interests. The self-managing interests, but also all sorts of different private interests of those local neighbors. The plot is placed in the offices of the local community, in the local pub, in the local shop. There is even a local butcher's place in one of the episodes, in the local flats, so houses of different characters from the series, and in the courtyards of those buildings. There is the public sphere, there is the private sphere. There are the systemic practices according to the law, and there are unsystemic practices which find their way of operation. Of course, the whole series is a comedy. It's irony of the self-managing system, as it usually did happen already in the 70s, but especially in the 80s. So there is a whole set of municipal relations. What do they say from time to time about the municipality? What is the bureaucracy in municipality? What do they do, and what are they good for? What are they not able to do? Different sorts of neighborly relations between them, marital relations, so many disputes between husbands and wives, also in connection with what was going on in the local community. Who is going to vote? How? Is the husband influencing the wife, or the wife influencing the husband, and so on and so on. All sorts of local gossips. Who does what with whom and why. There are men who drink, of course, as a must, and there are women who fight, not physically, please, but women who are really important in so many ways in this fiction. In every episode, women who are strong women, who are able to make a decision, who are able to fight for it even more than their husbands. So it's also a sort of message, I would say, not only between the lines, but really directly. And there is also an immigrant with practical solution, unsystemic solution, who is a Serb. He comes from Serbia, and it's clear that he's from there. His name is Joko. He's mixing Serbian and Slovenian. These relations are not really part of my analysis, but somebody else who is into interethnic relations or immigration to Slovenia, I'm sure such a researcher would find an interesting material in what Joko does and how is he perceived in the series. I will now go to the point from the title of this presentation. We are all good people. This phrase is reoccurring in every episode, usually when there is a need to establish a buffer zone, because something is not working out well, or because they are hoping it would turn out in the best possible way. So whenever the locals are dividing themselves in groups, opposing each other, while in fact they were supposed to communicate, to negotiate, to reach a consensus, then usually the secretary of the local community, that's his punchline, he says, but we are all good people, so please, let's find a solution. Whenever they are recruiting votes, grouping into different blocks, then there is that sentence, but please, we are all good people. When they are voting, again, please be smart, be careful what are you voting for. Is it your private interest or a larger social interest, public interest, which you should have in mind? So we are all good people. Whenever there are citizens gatherings, whenever somebody gains wealth illegally, gaining wealth without labor, that was one of the largest danger back then. So whenever they discover such a case, please, we are all good people. Whenever they are constructing a house illegally, doing something against the urban planning, then please, we are all good people. Whenever they show disrespect towards the municipality, we are all good people. And even when bureaucracy fails, we are again all good people. So yeah, things are not functioning, but it's self-management, so they are functioning in the best way they can, or the best way we can provide, and after all, we are all good people, and it should all be fine as it is. In the second last 8th episode, which brings out a variety of issues. The secretary in one moment said, only then, not before, not after, I'm not sure if we are all good people. So only one tiny second of doubt, but it is there. A bit later, when they solve all the problems in the best possible way, Joko, the bartender, the pub owner, said, well, you see, it turned out that the local community is not a piece of cake. Machi kashal, as he said. I will show you now a couple of moments from the series. Concite dia projekcija. Okay, this is it. I'm copying because it won't go directly. So I'm copying the link. So let's see, how do they say we are all good people? This is how it works out. Okay, the sound. So that is in the first episode, the first time that phrase appears in the series. Now let's see when he says later on that he was not sure that they were all really good people. What's the sound of that sentence?
Ne vem. Veš, če se ne vem. Ne vem, če smo res vsi dobri ljudje.
That is it, very short. And now the last one from this slide, when the pub owner, who is a very important figure for the rhythm of the whole story. Okay, here it is.
Ispade da krajevna skupnost nije mači kašalj, a? Malo smo se posvađali, za malo da se to bijelo protučemo. Ali na koncu radiš i klikeri, matematika, tehnika... Solidarnost, Čoko, to je nova ploča!
So this is how they sorted out everything, and everything turned out well. In different moments of the series, there is a sort of conflict between bureaucracy or real people, between words and deeds. So, for example, when there is the issue of kindergarten, when to build it, how to build it, and so on, the municipality planned it in only 5 years. But as they say in the local community, people know what they need. They organized an assembly, found a place in which they wanted to open a small local kindergarten, and not to wait for the municipality. When there was a tradesman in the local shop who was cheating on the scale when selling the goods, of course, bodies which were supposed to react, it was the Consumer Council, then the state inspectors, but actually the person who solved the problem was a woman who was described by her husband as a worse than fascist. So she, with her strong methods, came to the shop and find a way how to stop the cheating. When there was an idea from the local youth to open a disco in an abandoned place next to the pub, all what was coming from the municipality was called simple municipal demagogy. Yes, it's important for our youth, and so on and so on. We don't know when, we don't have the funding right now, please wait, there are more important projects, and so on. But then Joko, the pub owner, and the local youth organized themselves with the help of the local community and arranged the opening of a club in a place, and Joko had its special interests there, not to go now into details. Then a woman in poor financial condition was paying subsidized rent for a socially owned flat. The municipal self-managing community of interest for housing wanted to stop that and to introduce the full, not subsidized rent, but then the local community went against the self-managing community of interest and actually voted in favor. That was the last scene you saw when the local drunk says, yes, solidarity is the new idea we are establishing, and they voted. They want to still to support the woman who was in financial troubles. Especially interesting is the episode 9 in terms of bureaucracy, especially interesting. So it is called Forcibly Dead. There is a guy who is supposed to get married and he needs a document which would prove that he's alive. But then it turned out that he's illegally alive. He's looking for a confirmation, but then, as he was told, according to the birth register, he is dead and the register is sacrosanct. It doesn't matter if he's there, standing, speaking, talking, about to have a child, because that's the reason why he's getting married. But he cannot get a proper document confirming his status. So the clerk's wife says to his husband, again a woman, I myself told my husband he was a bureaucrat, which was just and the largest possible insult he couldn't take. They themselves in the series say, even Marx said, bureaucrat is the worst enemy of socialism. And at the end of the episode, they found a solution. A character in the series spilled some ink on the birth register, and then it turned out the twin brother, which died only 3 days after their birth, actually can be the dead person, and the twin Tomasz, who is living 30 years later, actually can be the one who survived. And now we're coming to the very last slides. Peca Kardelj, as the most important figure, as I said, for the organization, family, and the household, and later on for the local communities, although she was never called mother of local communities, but Edvard Kardelj was called the father of the local communities, but I mean, he was more important on the theoretical level, but I think what she was doing was more important in practice. Before dying, she said, local community has never been conceived otherwise than as a center for organizing people to develop and nurture humanity, camaraderie and friendship. That's how I understand it too. We are still far from that, although there are exemplary achievements. We went in a completely opposite direction to bureaucracy and formalism, to the local community as an extension of the municipality and authorities, although there is no basis for that. Some 60 different laws and acts on Republican and federal level were regulating different areas in which local community has something to say. They were saying it's too bureaucratic, it's too formalized, it's too regulated. So regulated that actually the real action is losing its root on the ground. This is already, this sentence which I just said actually can be a conclusion, but let me add something more. This is now actually the second last slide, but I can skip it. I can skip it as well and go directly to the very last one. It is clear that whenever municipality is mentioned, it equals the state, it equals bureaucracy, it equals something which should disappear if we follow the idea of withering away of the state. Whenever local community is mentioned in the documents, it is clear that it is the proper representative of the system of self-management, that it is the only place where direct democracy is happening, when real action, practice of self-management is happening. All these documents I've been using, actually, they show, can be observed actually from two perspectives. From below, we can check how ready citizens were to use all the tools of self-management which were there, given to them in this position. But we can also observe the situation from above and see how ready the upper structures were to allow those tools to be used. Why am I saying this? Because those upper structures actually had a fear of anarchism, had a feel of more self-management that they could cope with. One of the fear can be verbalized in a way, in the following way. Well, what if some people appear who have ideas which does not fit in the system of socialist self-management and Yugoslav socialism? What then? What they were supposed to do is to organize the actions. That was the role of the Socialist Alliance of the Working People on the very local level, the local branch, to canalize, to organize different actions, to put them in the scheme which would be accepted, and to try to have good people, even if sometimes they were not good according to the official standards. And of course, in every single action which is mentioned, there is always that message. We should spend less times on different sessions and meetings, and we should spend more time in doing proper job, far away from bureaucracy. Thank you.
For this very rich and exciting lecture. I'm sure there are a lot of comments or questions. Marko.
I would just like to add, this is of course our local community, naša krajevna skupnost, is something that I always thought someone should analyze this. Someone, and I really like that. And on the other hand, and also I would like to add the song is very important and it's very informative. It's a song about temporality of socialist life. The world actually begins Friday at 2 p.m. It ends in Sunday in the evening, and then you have time of your own. That's your time, and you can squeeze the time, and it's all about being a good people, or they also talk about being just computers, not caring about people. And this is, people talk about, yes, please.
Now, well, you can...
I finished, I want to hear.
About computers already back then,
Yeah.
1980, 81, who are destroying humanity.
Really sorry.
Šoferi mestnega prometa, tu sestanek, tam je zbor, pa spet nova seja, ponudnika, kot so lokali, okrog RTV-ja, to se govori med ljudmi, to se govori med ljudmi, več kot samo sebi, o meni kompjuterji.
Okay. We can stop here with the computer. Oh, okay. It is, yeah.
Actually more fun.
And actually, Anna, our hotel is there in the neighborhood of RTV, so maybe you did it on purpose. Okay.
Igor, you were explaining about the successes in local communities in building kindergarten schools. Well, in my local communities in Romania also, for example, firefighting stations. My question is, would you say that the successes were also related to the structure of the local community? If it was a rural or urban one, or if it was more new or old? Can you maybe elaborate more on the successes and in relation to the structure of local community?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, which is actually also connected to the whole system of financing of local communities. I mean, if local communities had several sources of income, the most important one was the income coming through the basic organizations of labor organizations from the territory of the local community, from the self-managing community of interest. But that also depended on how productive the territory is. I mean, if there are no proper balls, if that sort of income is low, then the whole local budget is going to be very weak. The other source of income was municipal budget, because they were putting aside certain amount, not only for the logistics, so for the office, phone bills, for a professional, because some of the communities had a professional secretary, for example, but also for some other activities. Third source were those self-contribution taxes, samo doprinos, samo prispevk, is it? Yeah. So that was very important. It was voted on a referendum in the local community or on the municipal level. It was important. And some special incomes which were coming, for example, from some parts of land tax or taxes for graveyards or places like that, which were given by the municipality to the local community, but that was really tiny income. So it means that if a local community had more employed persons, more population, more working population, it was bound to have more income. If it had a stronger ball on its territory, it was bound to have more income, which of course then brought to differences between different local communities. In the very late 80s, only in the very late 80s, 88, 89, when they were discussing different ways of reforming the system of local communities, they said within the Socialist Alliance, maybe we should establish a standard of social services So what sort of kindergarten, what sort of school, what sort of medical center we need. And municipality and the republic should be in charge for the standard level of facilities. If a local community then wants to have more and can finance more, then it should be a sort of supra-standard. But the basic facilities should be financed with different means outside of the local community, and fast enough. So these situations when local community was faster than municipality were not good, as they said only in 88, 89. They were hoping to stop this sort of practice. So yes, to go more directly back to your question, a local community in a large city with a large percentage of employed population was definitely more successful in financial terms, but not necessarily more successful in those humanizing, de-alienating and other practices, because it was more often a problem of mobilizing people in the urban centers than in villages. The rural population actually was more connected to their local communities, more eager to help, more eager to show solidarity. I mean, they knew each other better. It was a smaller surroundings. Quite often they knew each other by their first names. They knew each other's family and so on. So I would say that only in the villages, the local community had that proper original role of an extended family. In the cities, it was almost impossible. Usually actually impossible. Yeah.
Thank you, Pula.
Onda ću preći na hrvatski.
Okay.
Ono što si na kraju spomenuo, kadrovska politika. Kada je ona zapravo, to me interese, kada je zapravo, da kažem, upisana u zakone, da je to posle Ustava 74. ili kada, da naravno svi koji kandiduju za predsjednike mjesnih zajednice te stvari, treba da prvo budu potvrđena kandidatna lista na Socijalističkom savezu radnog naroda, da je to posle 74. ili već prije zapisano, ili kako je to bilo, jer naravno, sve te predlogi od dole treba da budu socijalistički. Ako si imao samo doprinos za kindergarten, možeš ga imati. A samo doprinos na selu da se obnovi naša crkva, to naravno nije dozvoljeno. Tu bi bilo jedno, kad je zapravo to ušlo u papire, u sustavni sistem. A drugo, ne znam baš, ne sjećam se kada je, ali znam samo koliko je uzbuđenja bilo u 80. godinama, u kriznim ekonomskom 80. godinama, kad je prvi put u Sloveniji, ne znam gdje je bio taj primjer, pao referendum. Kad su bile te, i onda, zašto to treba da bude samo doprinos? Kad vidimo da je samo doprinos, je samo povišene su to takse. To treba da bude iz budžeta opštine da se financira. Zašto bih mi sami trebali da gradimo školu, jer smo već za to u taksama platili. Da li je to u republikama, ako ste negde prepravili kakve usporedbe, da se to pojavljuje u istom vremenu, ili je ono, kako znamo, u 80. godinama Hrvatska je više ušutkana, kao recimo Srbija ili Slovenija, u Bosni i Makedoniji, ne znam bila šta se zbivalo. Da li ste imali gde kakve takve usporedbe kada se takvi konflikti, da li se u isto vreme pojavljaju po republikama, ili je to različito?
Okay. Anna, shall I reply in English because of the online audience? Or yeah. Okay. So the first question about when exactly this practice that the Socialist Alliance should confirm all the candidates on different lists for the local community. I actually don't know the exact year, but in all the documents after 74 it is there. I'm not sure now really if it appeared only in 74 or if it existed earlier, but I wouldn't say that the lists were open in the 60s. No, definitely not. If not Socialist Alliance, then maybe the party itself had some role in it. If not clearly written role, then an unwritten, self-understood role of checking the list, or putting their own members on the list. But after 74, definitely Socialist Alliance has that role of checking the list. And now, the differences between the republics and the different approaches to the self-contribution tax. On one side, I will say this. Self-contribution was really a financial necessity. So obviously the municipal budgets or Republican budgets, the way they were formed, were not able to finance everything that people needed. So definitely a lot of those social facilities were built, constructed, and so there was, the whole idea how to form a city quarter, all the facilities it should have, and so on and so on. I mean, the neighborhoods we live in nowadays quite often were formed in those areas, and we know that they have more content than the newly built neighborhoods. There was, apart from the financial need to take more money or squeeze more money, there was also a very interesting explanation, socialist or self-managing explanation. If people themselves co-finance something, they will feel it belongs to them more than if the municipality or the republic is the only source of funding. So if I know that certain percentage of my income goes to this road, to this highway, to the, for example, Učka tunnel connecting Istria with the rest of Croatia around 1980, then I feel proud of myself. I feel it is something mine as well. So this moment appears from time to time in the documents. So I wouldn't put a more strong emphasis on it than it actually deserves, if you go back to the context of the time. But from today's perspective, we might add, of course, some other elements as well. Then the differences or the situations when referendums failed. There were cases when referendums didn't fail, but then the money was spent on the wrong purpose. There were even such situations. So then there were quarrels, disputes between local different neighboring, for example. In the 80s there were referendums which failed, partly because of the financial crisis, because of the inflation, because of the drop of standard of living for 30%, for people who were less in favor of adding additional money to the social welfare system and those different actions. But if a referendum was successful, if money was collected, in the late 80s, quite often the money lost its value because of the high inflation rate. So if they planned to build, a kindergarten, at the end they were able to buy new toys only for the already existing small kindergarten, if they didn't act fast enough. There were situations, I know now some examples from East Croatia, Slavonia come to my mind, when some neighboring local municipalities had a referendum. They were on building a new water supply system together, but then one of the leading local municipality, the largest one with stronger input in it, actually changed the plan and started to build the water supply system on their territory, although it was planned, the beginning was planned in another neighboring local community, and then the quarrel starts. And then such quarrels actually go to the municipal level, but very, very easily, at least in the documents I've seen for Croatia, very easily they reach the Croatian parliament. the House of Municipalities. Every Republican parliament had a House of Municipalities, and quite often representatives of that House of the Parliament, Republican Parliament, were accepting, had meetings with representatives of different local communities and trying to solve issues which existed there on the territories. They were, and I have a number of interesting cases like these ones, disputes when, for example, some villages wanted to, I'll now invent a case and merge different stories from different parts, from different field cases. So some villages want to proclaim independence from their local community. They want to found a local community of their own. Because, I mean, the reasons they are giving are so similar to the reasons Slovenia and Croatia were saying about the Yugoslav Federation as a whole in the 80s and earlier as well. So, you know, the village which has the seat of the local community is not paying respect to our needs and wishes. We pay more money and receive less. The money is going elsewhere. We want to be independent. We want to be proper self-managers. They always know the language. They know what they want to say and how to phrase it properly. So we need more self-management. We want to be responsible for our development, and we want a local community of our own. Municipality usually reacts in a negative way. Then the case comes to the parliament, Republican Parliament, and then the Republican Parliament usually plays the role of a good cop, because municipalities has the role of the bad cop, and is squeezed in the sandwich between Republic and the local community. And then the Republican Parliament sends a message saying, please, you should respect the need of the locals. You should allow them according to the whole follow the procedure and proclaim a local community of their own. But municipality is a hard player. That's why it's often mentioned as the bureaucratic power, as the state power, and so on, and so on. But the phrases which are used in those documents are extremely interesting. The discourse that they are using, the argumentation they are using, which goes back to the Second World War. We fought for this. We were making the state and the system, and now somebody, a bureaucrat, doesn't allow us to enjoy all the fruits of self-management. Sometimes it's heartbreaking, but a really strong political discourse. The differences in different parts of Yugoslavia certainly exist. What the documents I've been using are actually coming from the federal level. Reports from different areas coming to the Federal Socialist Alliance, the Federal Conference for the local communities, and in Zagreb the Croatian case as well in more detail. There are differences in the first of all in the size of local community. Croatia has the smallest ones. Slovenia and Vojvodina are very close. Which then again says something. Okay, maybe we can conclude that more developed parts of Yugoslavia, which had more economic power, actually were able to have more local communities, which were able to finance themselves and organize the way they wanted to operate. Then again, for example, within Croatia, the north and western part, so the area from Istria, Kvarner, Gorski Kotar, Zagreb, all the way up to Varaždin and Čakovec were more active than Slavonia and Dalmatia. So yes, there are differences, and interestingly, they quite often point towards the GDP level or level of general development. Although, for example, in the paper Mjesne zajednice, almost always all the nice, human, warm stories about people who were activists for decades, who were living for their local communities, majority of those cases is coming from Central Serbia and Bosnia. maybe it is a way to motivate the locals there to be more active, although quite often those activists were presented as local superheroes. So I fear that they brought more fear to the younger possible candidates than they had that role, that status of a role model to follow, because the standard those people set, and they were there for decades, was quite high. Yeah.
Thank you, Jasha.
Yeah, I have a question about the slide that you skipped. I don't know if I saw correctly, but was the critical analysis of the political and constitutional system.
Yep.
Could you explain what was the criticism of the local communities? Because I never heard about that before. I know the analysis, but I don't know the attitude towards local communities.
Yeah. So yes, this is that document. They worked on it for about 2 years. It was a special federal commission, as you already know. Then there was the public debate at the turn of 85 to 86, and then there were also the special forms of that document, which were actually excerpts, abstracts. Dealing only with the situation in the local communities. So what they concluded is there should be less state on the local level, but also less informal groups. Maybe less people like Joko from the TV series. Quite often, actually, the pub owners, the local tradesmen were presented negatively in the 80s as the awakening local bourgeoisie, small entrepreneurs, which are needed, especially underlined in the very late 80s with Markovic's government. But earlier on in the 80s, they were the suspectful one, especially because they had those little networks. Who is coming to the pub, who is meeting whom, arranging what below under the table, and for whose account. So they said we need more delegate system, more self-management, more people engaged, so more rotating, more people coming there for 4 years then disappearing, more people being present. If more people are included and rotating themselves, then people will have more trust in the delegate system and in the self-management, because it won't be only for some, but it would be actually for all. Because in the 80s, back then in the mid-80s, they realized that there is the lack of engaged citizens in the local communities. They said people are losing trust. We need more activists. They were aware of something what they called bureaucratic usurpations of the system on the very local level. They were saying there is grouping, sectarianism, manipulation, and other deformations. And yes, I saw all that in the sources and also in fictional sources as well. Then the document is giving a special role to the Socialist Alliance, its local organizations. They should organize the socialist powers, take care of the proper socialist powers who will be in line with the system and react against the, as they said, egoistic, particularist, nationalist, bureaucratic, and other anti-self-management interest. It was a thin line, I would say, between more self-management and nationalism or localism or particularianism of different kinds. And those arguments or counter-arguments were actually exchanged quite easily. From one side, we need more self-management. Maybe they really did, but maybe they were just using the language in order to cover what they actually wanted. And then on the other side, yes, but this is not self-management only. These are your particular individual interests. They will put the larger surrounding the society in danger, actually. They are not of public public interest. And there is, in addition to this, there is again a debate of 89, early 1990 as well, when they are trying to find a new solution for the local communities. As far as I know, the name survived after 1990 in all republics, post-Yugoslav states, but Croatia. In Croatia, the new law of local administration was introduced in the last days of 92 with implementation from January 93. So after 62, exactly 30 years later, those socialist municipalities were dismantled and 500 of new local units were introduced, municipalities and cities, which were then divided not on local communities but on local boards. Which, I mean, some of the roles were similar, but the whole story of self-management, of course, disappeared, and participation is lower than it used to be back then. Just a couple of more sentences following this idea of what was going on in the 89. I mean, I had something similar. I know that Aleš probably remembers it with my book on pioneers. The last chapter there was about what's going to happen with Yugoslav pioneers, the debates they had in 89 or early 1990. I see something similar here. People who were really connected with the local communities, with these conferences of local communities on the Republican or federal level, are actually designing their new starting position for year 1990. Some are following what they were saying, and they are saying, yes, we still need local communities. It's self-governing, it's local administration, it exists in every system. We just need to reorganize it and be sure that it stays a non-party system. So on the very local level, they were really, some of them are really trying to say, yeah, local communities, whatever they are going to be called, but let's not allow the parties, political parties, to enter that field. On the municipal level, yes, but not on the local community level. But some are actually, throwing ashes on everything what they did. They were saying it was too much of ideology, too much of self-defense mechanisms, too much of self-contributions, too much. Some are even saying it was forced socialist direct democracy and so on and so on. So yes, still within the Socialist Alliance, 89, those debates are really interesting. I didn't follow, what happened. I know for some of them, but it would be another research. What happened with some of those actors in the early 90s and later, depending on what they were saying in 89. Yeah, maybe.
Thank you, Igor, for the lecture. You were mentioning the success of the local communities in the villages. So, this level of rural environment, are you familiar with the dynamics between the official local communities and other less formal types of self-organization or decision-making, perhaps the more traditional type of organization existed from before the war? Mm-hmm. So, I'm particularly interested in the south of Yugoslavia and being populated lands, Macedonia, Kosovo, and so on. So any conflict perhaps between the old and the new in this sense, and not necessarily only conflict, but also perhaps collaboration or competition even, and so on.
Yeah, an interesting question. The whole story of local community as an extended family actually resembles to zadruge as extended large families, not cooperatives, but extended large families which existed in part of the Balkans, and actually in all villages on the Yugoslav territories. I mean, families were large before the modernization of the mid-20th century, with so many children, still all of them living around the parents, grandparents, different relatives in the same village, in the neighboring courtyards, and so on and so on. So there are resemblances with that old ways of life in the rural neighborhoods. Another resemblance is several times I said, yes, there were people who were active for decades in their rural local communities. Some of those characters which appear in the interviews, for example, in the paper Local Community, are presented as a sort of alpha male or alpha female for their village or neighboring villages. I'm sure that even without the system of local communities, even without socialism, those persons would be the most important figures in their village. Somebody who gives advices, somebody whom people listen to, somebody who solves issues, somebody who is there in all sorts of difficulties or celebrations even. So it is therefore good if they were somehow merged with the system of the local communities, because anybody else would be just an apparatchik. I mean, somebody who would have most probably no influence on the village and on the locals. It's also good if those alpha figures actually could work well with the party as well. Of course, if they were against the communism as such, there was no place for them. That's sure. No place in the system of the local communities. Reports from Kosovo, for example, on the federal level are very rare. I haven't visited every capital on the post-Yugoslav territory. It would be really a much larger project than this one, which I'm doing, especially very hard to organize in the COVID years. So I don't know, for example, for the archives in Pristina or the very local archives, what do they have? But from my experience within Croatia, local communities' archives quite often disappeared, or they were destroyed because they were perceived as totally unimportant. Destroyed by the locals themselves, the last political figures who were active there in the early 90s, or usually in that period. So I cannot know what a researcher could find in different parts of post-Yugoslav territories, but there are the reports from Kosovo do point out one thing, which can be phrased like this. We need more local communities because that's the only way how the situation in Kosovo might improve. People from the Conference of the Local Communities of Yugoslavia are saying that. So there are probably troubles on the very local level within the ethnic Albanian communities, Serb communities, mixed communities. There were such probably in the cities, definitely. So the idea was to reinforce the activities in the local communities because that might bring the neighbors together, neighbors of different ethnicities. In one of the debates in Zagreb, for example, there was a report from one of the Zagreb as a large city was divided in municipalities and then municipalities furthermore to local communities. One of the reports from Medveščak municipality within Zagreb sent to the Republican level actually says something interesting which can be understood, of course, as Orientalism, looking from above or whatever, but what they say is if the situation in Zagreb is this bad, if we have such problems in Zagreb, imagine what's going on in Kosovo. So yes, let's not judge according to the Zagreb report, but so from different sources, I wouldn't expect that the system of local communities was working well there. Yeah, unfortunately.
Igor, you mentioned the importance of socialist alliance of working people within the local communities, and then also how active were the veterans, vodi. And we have now here a question from our Zoom participant, Joe, and he asks, what was the role of the League of Communists in the local communities? Did they direct, coordinate, or at least influence the actions of communist members in local communities?
The guidelines which were sent to the very local branches of the League of Communists usually were saying the party should have an important role, but only to serve as a guiding force, as an avant-garde force, as somebody who will show the right path. So do not get interfered more than that. Keep your eyes open and be there as a sort of as a directing force, not a force which would actually be strong power. So act as a soft power, if I could sum it up in the shortest possible way. That was the written guideline. In addition to this, party had a problem that the most active part of population, so the workers who were party members, were already active at their workplace. Their basic party organizations were there. So originally it was not meant that they could participate in two different basic organizations, in their workplace and in their place of dwelling as residents there. But there were so many initiatives which were trying to at least unofficially convince active party members to be active in their free time in their local community as well. Why? Because without them, the local communists were actually those which I mentioned earlier in one of the slides. Retired people, retired army officers, housewives sometimes. So they wanted to have more people from the working sector, labor sector, from the active, demographically active population. The response was very, very weak. Very weak. Usually the explanation sounded like this. Yes, but we are already active at our workplace. We participate there at the meetings. Come on, with our family lives and so on, we don't have the will nor the time to participate in additional party meetings in the afternoons. That was a constant problem. The demographics of the party members within the local community. Informally, I would say that the party members, of course, knew pretty well the local activists of the Socialist Alliance. They collaborated closely, and not much was going on without their knowledge or without coordination or without any sort of green light they were supposed to give. But I mean, I don't see them as, you know, a sort of dark power in working in a gray zone. I mean, it's local community. The issues they were dealing with were quite often important for the locals, but those are not state issues. I mean, therefore the role of the party is not something which should be understood as extremely important in a local community. If I may add another sentence now, since I have mentioned that the role of the local community was not serious enough, or actually was not taken seriously enough. That was another problem which I haven't mentioned. The perspective of the municipal authorities or the Republican authorities quite often was, yes, we need self-management on the local level, we need local communities, we need people to, be active in this way, there, but the local communities actually were perceived as a sort of, I will exaggerate now, but I'm going to say it as a free time activity. In any other scenario, they would be better financed, and there would be more enforcement in what they were supposed to do, because the scheme was there. But not every local community had to put, a check sign in every little house of that a column of that table of that scheme, and said, yes, we have this branch, that branch, delegate here, delegate there. That was the scheme, but no strong reinforcement or obligation to cover all the parts of the scheme. After all, there was this system of competition among the local communities. There were cycles of four-year competition. PAMS in Croatian is the name, plan of activities, of program of activities of local communities. So there was a list of duties, tasks, practices a local community should be involved in, and only those communities which decided to participate in the competition were expected to fill in, the majority of those tasks which were part of the more general scheme, and the minority of local communities participated in this competition. In the 80s, around half of the communities were not able to write a 5-year plan. And they worked out without a 5-year plan. They really show, I would say, all the good ideas, but also the whole range of weaknesses of Yugoslav social self-management. It is there, but then again, it is not there in so many ways. And the role of the party, just to go short, they were there, but definitely not with a pistol, in somebody's head saying, yes, come on, call the gathering of the citizens today, we need to solve this out. They according to my knowledge, when I say this, I don't exclude the possibility that there was, a strong personality somewhere there who was visiting, knocking on doors, phoning and so on, putting pressure on some of the candidates, delegates, or whatever, because such possibilities were there, definitely. I just haven't found any specific reports on such hardline cases in the archives, but in different places, why not? So, I don't exclude such a possibility, but it was not a rule, and it was not a written obligation to act like that.
Was there a branch of the League of Communists in every local community, or in most of them, or?
As with any other branch of political or social-political organizations, ideally, yes. At least of the party and of the Socialist Alliance, at least those two. But there were some which had none. And for all the other organizations, it depended on the number of local members who were there. Depended in which part of Yugoslavia somebody lived. I assumed there was a local community somewhere comprised of 3 villages, which maybe didn't have, a single partisan fighter because they belonged to a different side in the war. So I wouldn't expect them to have a Subnor, so the veteran partisan organization. And it was used sometimes, now another story comes to my mind, as an argument as well, between different local communities in all those conflicts some of them had. We, for example, in one of the letters, our community, its representatives say, we fought in the war on the right side, and look at your village. We know what you were doing during the war, and even nowadays you still have ruins in your village. And they are saying that in the early 80s. So yes, sometimes when the situation was on the edge, especially when it comes to funding, it was a quarrel because of this specific case. It was a quarrel which appeared because of the introduction of the biggest local issue of the 80s, introduction of the phone lines. Which village is going to be first again? And then those arguments were also present.
Thank you.
Nearly 40 years after the war.
Še kakšno vprašanje? Če ne, if not, then we can discuss further over lunch. Thank you, Igor, so much. Really exciting. Thank you.
Thank you a lot.